Has anyone here ever heard of the author Byron Katie? No? She has written 3 best-selling books and lots of other books, too many to list. But she has the strangest story I think I've ever heard. Byron Katie was a wife and a mother. She had 3 children. She had a career in real estate. She lived in California. But for some unknown, undisclosed reason, she began to spiral down into despair and fits of rage. And that happened over a 10-year period. Every year she got worse. She got more depressed, more despondent, more enraged. And then she developed paranoia. And then she developed agoraphobia, so she was afraid to leave her home. For almost 2 years, she did not leave the house at all, and most of that time she stayed in her bed. She was too weak some days to even get up to bathe and brush her teeth. And her children were afraid of her. Her children would tiptoe past her bedroom door, hoping that she didn't notice them, or they might be on the receiving end of all of that rage. She was clearly having a mental health crisis. So at one point, she had just a moment of clarity, and she called her health insurance carrier and asked, "How do I get help? Where can I go?" And the only place they covered was a halfway house for women with eating disorders. And so she went. She knew she had to get help somewhere. And when she arrived at this home, it turned out that she frightened the other residents so much that she couldn't be with them. They made a room for her in the attic, put a bed and made an attic room, and put Byron Katie in the attic by herself. And although she had a bed, she remembers that she felt too unworthy to even sleep in a bed. She slept on the floor of that attic. And then one morning, about a week later, she wakes up on the floor, and she doesn't know who or what she is. She said she couldn't remember much of her despair and her rage. She felt like somebody else was looking through her eyes. And whoever that was, they were delighted. They looked around at the attic and everything was beautiful. They loved this life. It was like somebody else inside her had awakened. Laughter and joy bubbled up out of her, and I know you're thinking, as I was, she's had a full psychotic break, right? But she didn't. What happened on that floor was the old Byron Katie died, and this new person, her true self, had awakened. Now, during Lent, we talk a lot about death, don't we? We start with Ash Wednesday when we get the sign of the cross and ashes on our foreheads to remind us that this life is not all there is, that we will lay this body down at some point in time. And today in our reading, Jesus is talking about his death. Now, we're in John's gospel today, and I feel like we need a little bit of context on what this gospel is about. We have talked about it in the past, but John's gospel is a little complex, and so it takes a while to remember what the themes are that run through this gospel. And so my source today is Larry Paul Jones, who did some extensive writing and research on this gospel. And he says the first thing that we need to remember is that in John's gospel there are layers of meaning. So if you read this gospel quickly or superficially or literally, you will miss all those layers of meaning that John has placed there for us to discover. John's gospel, remember, does not see the same as the other gospels, right? The synoptic gospels all kind of have the same view, but John's is distinctly different. Now, Jones also points out that we see a lot of Greek philosophy in John's gospel, which is why sometimes it's difficult to understand. Now, remember Plato. Plato lived a couple centuries before Jesus, so that Greek philosophy was known in Jesus' time. And the author of John's Gospel uses a lot of that philosophy. There's a polarity between light and dark in John's Gospel. The world is dark, and everyone whose spirit is awakened and evolved is light. If you believe in Jesus, if you're seeking Christ, you are glowing with light in the midst of this dark world. There are others like life and death, good and evil. All of those polarities, when we see them in John's Gospel, that is some of this Hellenistic philosophy that we're seeing in the stories that Jesus tells. And also, of course, Plato's idea that we don't even see reality correctly. We don't see ultimate reality. We are seeing a shadow of it. And John's Gospel, again, on the surface, that's not what it's about. We have to dig down into it to get to the point of the stories. And then the last thing that Jones cautions us about is Gnosticism. He says that John's Gospel has a Gnostic flavor. I feel like Dr. Elaine Pagels is correct when she says this is just a Gnostic gospel. And Gnosticism was a sect of Christianity that saw the whole world, all of matter, as corruptible and even evil. And the only thing that really counted was the spirit. And your goal in life was to learn what you needed to learn so that your spirit could evolve and you could transform. And we do see, if you're looking for these things, you will see them when you read John's Gospel. Okay, so now if you're feeling like you're in the weeds, that's okay. We're going to come back to the Gospel now. We'll get into the reading and see if we can tease out just a couple of things that we didn't know when we walked in this morning, okay? So this Gospel begins with these Greek people who come to Jerusalem during the feast week, and they want to meet Jesus. And it's kind of interesting because I don't think these Greek folks could speak Aramaic. And Jesus and the disciples spoke Aramaic. So it says here that they went to Philip. And I think that's interesting because Philip is a Greek name. So maybe Philip understood Greek. Maybe he could translate. They tell Philip, we want to see Jesus. And then Philip goes to Andrew, another Greek name, and tells Andrew, there are these Greek people over here, they want to see Jesus. And then eventually the two of them go to Jesus and say again, there are some Greek people here to see you. And then we never hear another word about the Greeks. They disappear from the story. You can read John's Gospel all the way to the end, and these Greek people in our story today never reappear. What happened to them? Why are they here? Did Jesus ever sit down and talk to them? Did he spend any time with them at all? What Jesus said is, as soon as he hears these Greek folks are here to meet with him, he says, the hour has come. This is the time for the Son of Man to be glorified. It's almost confirmation for Jesus that he has just a few days left and he will not be here in human form any longer. Now, Jones, the scholar I mentioned, says that to understand what might be happening with these Greek folks, we have to go back to John chapter 7. In John chapter 7, Jesus is saying to his disciples, my time has not yet come. Even though the chief priests and the Pharisees are looking for ways to arrest Jesus, they are already feeling threatened by him. So Jesus says, my time has not come. These people are looking for ways to arrest me. And the narrator of John's Gospel lets us know that the Pharisees and the chief priests, they are saying to one another, where's he going to go next? Who is he going to talk to next? He's getting support from all over. Is he going to go to all the Jewish people that are scattered all over? Is he going to go all the way to the Greeks? Well, he didn't have to, did he? Because in chapter 12, the Greeks came to him. And the moment they do, Jesus knows that his reach is now far enough. If he had any questions about whether or not he was going to die soon, the arrival of these Greek people told him that his time was short. If people who speak Greek have heard of Jesus and have traveled to Jerusalem to meet him, it's time. So then Jesus goes into this conversation with his disciples, explaining what time means. When it is time, when the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified, what's going to happen? He's going to die. And he uses an illustration much like we use in a children's message. See this little grain of wheat? If we just set it here, nothing will ever happen. But if we plant it in the ground, it will grow and it will create more wheat and we will have a real transformation. So he explains it to the disciples as if they're children. And he lets them know that this death, this change, this transformation is coming. And that's what happened to Byron Katie. She was laying on the floor of that attic, a new person, bubbling with joy. So the halfway house said, "You don't need to be here." Now they're probably more afraid of her, right, than they were when she arrived. They send her home. Her children are very suspicious. They don't know this new happy mom. They only know the mean mom who yelled at them and refused to come out of her room and made demands on them. So they're all waiting for the other shoe to drop. When is she going to go back to being the way she was? And the answer is never. She never goes back to the way she was because the old Byron Katie had died. And this was her true self. The self that had been covered up by all of the mental health crises that she had endured for 10 years. Now, as her transformation became well known in her neighborhood, people began to show up on her doorstep, and they would ask her, "How did you change? And can I do it too? Can you help me change like you did?" And so Byron Katie began to realize that there was one thing she did when she was laying on that floor in the attic. She refused to believe her own thoughts. She heard a thought such as, "You are not worthy to sleep in this bed." And she simply asked, "Is that true?" And as soon as she pushed back against her thoughts, she realized that much of what she believed about herself and about her life was not true. And that was causing her all kinds of suffering. So when she asked, "Is it true?" and realized it wasn't, she was free. She was free from this suffering. So she counseled people to do that. Don't believe all the thoughts in your own heads. This again is a little bit of Greek philosophy because the head or the mind was viewed as a bird cage. And our thoughts are birds. And if you get a whole bunch of screaming birds in a bird cage, yeah, you're feeling like Byron Katie did before she had her transformation. So we have to notice our thoughts and decide, is that true? Is this thought serving me, or do I need to let it go? So she developed something she calls the work. And if you're interested, you can look it up. It's online. It's all free. She teaches anybody who asks, who's willing to do the work. And it's just a series of 4 questions, beginning with, is it true? So you examine a thought. Let me throw out an example. I just saw a girl the other day whose blue jeans were so ripped, they weren't even pants at that point. And I had the thought, oh, she shouldn't wear pants that look like that. She shouldn't wear pants that look like that. And I tried this, and I said to myself, is that true? Is it any of my business, for starters? No. But the reality is that she is wearing pants that look like that. And if I say she should not be wearing pants that look like that, I am in dissonance with reality. And that just makes me upset. Do you understand? It's not too hard. I don't want everybody to be in the weeds today with me. I want to use simple examples so we can understand this question. So the next time you're upset about something, maybe you can say to yourself, is it true? My feeling about this, is it true? So Byron Katie develops this practice called the work, and people begin calling her, small groups and large groups, and for the past 30 years, she has traveled all over the world. She has been in church basements, in schools, in community centers, in large corporations, in law firms, and wherever somebody has called her to come, she will come and she will teach this. You can also find her on YouTube, and it's fascinating when she sits down with somebody who is just in despair or very angry about something, and she teases out those beliefs, and then one by one she'll say, "Is that true?" And the person realizes for the first time that 9 times out of 10, their belief is wrong. Their left brain has been spinning a story, and none of it's true. Now, I'm not trying to minimize the things in our life that really are concerns. But I do want to point out, even for things like social justice, we can say we should not live in a world where there is social injustice. Is that true? Because the truth is, we do live in a world where there is social injustice. It's a very small change, a small shift in thinking that allows you to do the work to help people who are suffering from injustice without adding to the problem by feeling angry yourself. Because if you're feeling angry and upset, you're not helping them. You're just feeling angry and upset, and it's not serving a purpose. So this method of inquiry is what Byron Katie shares with the world, and thousands of people's lives have been transformed. And what I found fascinating in our reading today is that Jesus also uses a method of inquiry. I was so excited to see this. I never know where these sermons are going to go until sometime Saturday night. Jesus says, "My soul is troubled." I wonder if I should ask God to get me out of this. My translation. Now, why would Jesus' soul be troubled? He knows the end is near. He knows he has a few days left. He knows people are going to turn on him. They're going to ridicule him and mock him. He's going to be in for a very painful death. And he's saying things to himself like, this is going to be terrible. I don't want to do this. Why would I want to do this? Maybe I should ask God just to get me out of here. And then he answers his own inquiry. He asks the question about his thoughts. Is that true? And he says, no, because I came to do this. I came to die. And so I think I'll do it. Very matter of fact, this is the beauty of John's gospel. Jesus is very powerful in John's gospel. He's very much in control. Jones points out that John's Jesus, does not suffer. There is no temptation in the wilderness. Jesus does not agonize in the Garden of Gethsemane where great drops of blood like sweat are falling from him. He does not hang on the cross and say, my God, why have you abandoned me? No, this Jesus in John's gospel said, nobody takes my life from me. I lay it down and I will pick it up again. It's a very different look at Jesus in John's gospel. He doesn't suffer because he doesn't have a bird cage full of birds fluttering around in his head, screaming at him that everybody hates him and he's going to die and it's going to be horrible. This Jesus lets those thoughts go, asks if it's true, and says, nope, I came to die. So there's nothing here that God has to get me out of. Now, it has always bugged me that we focus so much on the death of Jesus that sometimes we don't talk enough about his life and what he taught us. Because every moment of his teaching that we have, there's something rich there that we can tease out, that we can learn by his example. And I often wondered if he wasn't crucified, would he live and, be on the mountain like a guru and have a little shack, and people could go up the mountain and ask their questions and Jesus would dispense with some wisdom. But Jesus is saying in this scripture, that's not what he came for. He did not come to teach us like a guru on a mountain. He came to die. He shows us how to live, and then he shows us how to die. That's what we focus on during Lent. How do we live? How do we die? Now, Byron Katie does not suffer anymore either. Every day is a new day. Every day she sees the sunrise like it's the first time she's seen it. Every time she tastes ice cream and birthday cake, it's like the first time she's tasted those things. She has never gone back to her old self. And that is the true transformation that Jesus wants us to experience for ourselves. And so today, I just want to invite everyone to take those 3 words with you. Is this true? And when you have a thought that is troubling you, when you see somebody, maybe your neighbor across the street, and they don't wave at you, and you think, oh no, my neighbor's mad at me, and your brain just spins a story about your neighbor must be mad because of this, this, and this, ask yourself, is that true? Or have you just told yourself a story? And today we cannot leave until you have heard the words that God loves you. God loves every single one of you. Is that true?